Welcome back, guys. My next guest, he's worked at Porsche Cars North America for 13 years. He's actually celebrating his 13th anniversary this month. He's held 7 different positions at Porsche, former D1 college soccer player and coach, and he's now an avid golfer, which is the typical transition. And he has an MBA at Kennesaw State University, branded entertainment marketing manager at Porsche Cars North America, Scott DeVault. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I met at actually, I had the pleasure of doing the fireside chat at your, I say, office slash racetrack slash test facility in Atlanta late last year with Brand Innovators. So awesome to have you on the podcast. And I know from a personal perspective, you got a lot going on in life. So I had the pleasure of meeting your fiance, and I know I'm rooting for a certain venue for you. So if that happens, I may be in the background at Floribama.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me again. The last time we spoke was a lot of fun at Porsche Experience Center Atlanta. So glad we can follow that up with maybe more in-depth conversation.
Yeah, and most of my listeners know this, but I'm fly all the time, and I'm kind of terrified of flying, which is a really silly thing. And I love cars and I love racing, and to be able to be on stage with you, and then you guys took us on the test track, and I'm going 134 miles an hour with one of the coolest guys that I met for a brief 2 minutes flying around the track. He was a professional driver, obviously. And then I get on an airplane and I'm like, you know what? I think what I just experienced, like this flight should be completely smooth. But it was amazing, Scott, to like feel such an amazing vehicle that as a child growing up, just always admired and thought was one of the coolest vehicles. So to be able to chat with you again is kind of fun.
Yeah. Great to speak with you again. And yeah, the Porsche Experience Center, we've got the Atlanta location, which you visited, also one in Los Angeles, are such amazing assets and resources for us. Internally, we can make all of the coolest content in the world, but nothing changes the experience you had. Nothing can beat the experience you had with what we say butts and seats. We can tell you how great it is all day long, but when people get out of that car, you see that smile on their face and the energy coming out of it. It's like, okay, you understand the brand, you understand our products, unlike any other experience. So it was really excited that you were able to do that. And we just actually welcomed our millionth Porsche Experience Center guest across both locations just this month. So we opened up the Atlanta location in 2015, and then we opened up LA just a few years later. So in just 10 years with Atlanta and about the same, or just a little less in LA, a million visitors have come through the building, which is just really amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, I've obviously flying, connecting into Atlanta, have always flown over the facility. And actually, I think I told you this, but got a layover that ended up a cancellation flight where I actually stayed at the hotel right adjacent to the Porsche facility in Atlanta, and woke up that morning before I headed out for an early flight and like saw the cars. I'm like, one day I have to do that. So to get to experience that was super cool. But so let's take a step back. So congrats, 13 years at one company is very uncommon. I get told that all the time, being 20 years at Lamar. But let's take a step back. Like where did the career start before you came to Porsche? Let's kind of get our listeners like how and where Scott became obsessed with what you do, but where did it
Yeah,
start before that?
yeah. I kind of always grew up a car person. You know, I don't know if this is good to say or not, but Fast and Furious was very prominent with me growing up in the early 2000s, kind of introducing the car culture from a very young age. One of my early Porsche kind of experiences in the late 90s, the 1998 911 GT1, winning Le Mans, that car, that shape, stuck with me. I didn't really know much about Porsche at the time, but it's just a shape, it's just a brand that kind of sticks with you over time. And I went off to school. I went to Georgia Southern for 3 years, played soccer there, as you mentioned, and then transferred my last year to Oglethorpe, which is kind of right in the middle of downtown Atlanta. and quickly found out my senior year once I transferred that Porsche Cars North America's headquarters was in Atlanta. I had no idea that it had been there actually since 1998 on the north side of the city before we moved to the Experience Center. So once I heard that, I was like, I got to be a part of this. So when I finished up undergraduate, I applied for an internship with the marketing and communications team. Unfortunately, didn't get a call, didn't get an interview, didn't work out. But honestly, it was 2009. Not a lot of opportunities for recent undergraduate coming into the workforce. So at that time, I decided, all right, I'm going to keep coaching. I'm going to keep staying close to soccer and go grab my MBA from Kennesaw State University. So for 2.5 years, I was coaching and taking classes at Kennesaw State University. When I finished that program, when I finished my MBA, I reapplied to literally the same exact internship at Porsche Cars North America. But luckily this time I had some inside help. One of a former women's college soccer player at Oglethorpe was now working at PCNA. So she helped me out. I probably owe my 13-year career to her. She's now since moved on to another Stuttgart brand, surprisingly, Mercedes-Benz. But she's a huge reason why I got my foot in the door, got an interview, and took that internship in 2013. So March 2013 was the start of my internship, and from there, as you mentioned, I've had 7 roles over 13 years.
Yeah, that's incredible. So soccer, let's talk about that a tad if you'd like. What position? And I love this because it's funny. We had someone on the podcast just the other day that we recorded, and they were like, hey, I feel like I have to mention that I played a college sport because every one of I'd say probably 80%, Scott, of our guests like played at the collegiate level. And I have some theories behind that. Not that I go after, and that's one of the filter if you want to be a guest, but it's more the work ethic, the tenacity. And I want to go deeper into that story about, getting rejected, not rejected, but rejected in a sense. I have a very similar story here at Lamar. Take us back to soccer, like growing up. You obviously were a dude if you played D1 soccer, and not a shabby university either where you played. What was that experience like, your work ethic, and then maybe how did that translate over to who you are today?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of what I learned from competitive sports, a lot of the habits that I formed translate into my working life tremendously. First and foremost, I'm a just uber competitive person. I love competing, whether it's darts, having a few beers with friends, or it's playing a board game. I want to win, and I think that was developed at a young age. But I played club soccer here in Atlanta. It was a club that no longer exists called United Quest. It's now kind of been merged. And to be honest, I played on a really good team. We were a state championship team. Had probably most of our team went and played collegiately if they wanted to. Of the players that wanted to go play in college, they had an opportunity to do so at high levels in D1. But to be honest, I was undersized. I played right back, center back, and was on our team, just not really recruited all that heavily. I had to kind of seek out colleges, get my name out there. Here's my resume and my highlight reel. And I'm looking around me, and a lot of the guys on my team, Indiana's calling this guy, Notre Dame's calling other guys, and I'm like, I'm on the same team. I should be getting more interest, but it was what it was. I wasn't heavily recruited. I ended up taking an offer, I would say just an offer to join the team. It wasn't a scholarship offer at Georgia Southern, but I had my heart set on D1. In hindsight, I probably should have opened that aperture. But at that time, I was like, I want to be a professional soccer player. To be a professional soccer player, you need to be playing Division One. So I ended up taking the only D1 school that really made a spot for me was Georgia Southern, but no scholarship. Luckily, it was in state, and I had Hope, which at the time I think might still exist. Hope Scholarship covered a significant portion of my books and other fees that had to be taken care of, but got to work and after my first year, I was on a full ride. Starting
Amazing.
my sophomore year, so
Yeah.
I have kind of an underdog. I was again undersized kind of mentality going into it, and that's how I approach both soccer, but also my career as well. Something that underestimated a lot in my life, and I think that's kind of the chip on my shoulder
Yep.
and what feeds that competitive edge. And I think it's a lot of the success I've had professionally. I can kind of trace back to some of the habits that you form. You have to learn how to lose. You have to learn how to win. You have to learn how to live with a bad game or a good game or whatever it may be. Like all of those experiences in sports, I think translate into just general life, but also professional, corporate environments as well. And I hang my hat on being competitive. Sometimes it's the best attribute. Sometimes it's not. And it's learning to figure out when to turn it down a little bit and when to turn it up. I owe a lot to my coaches, my teammates, and those experiences that kind of form, who I am and how I work now.
Yeah. I felt like you and I hit it off when we first met, like off stage. And now it's like, that's it. I'm like, because I had the same experience, right? Chip on my shoulder. I was a 6'1",
Yeah,
Division two
undersized for
basketball
basketball.
player. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's unheard of, but the same mentality, we talk about it all the time, not only inside my house, cause we push our kids, but also, when I talk to my employees and talk to others, they're like, where and how did you get to where you are? And how do you have that mentality? And, I think you hit the nail on the head. But it's also those high pressure situations that you're in, even, at the high school level, but once you go on to play college, no matter what, D1, D3, NAIA, it's that pressure of performing once you get into the real world. It's unmatched. I love that story and that journey for you, and everything timing helps. We talk about it a good bit on the podcast. Shout out to the person that that gave you that in at Porsche, and here you are. Yeah, so that's phenomenal, and the tenacity side of things is huge.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Tell me no, and it makes me want it more.
but yeah,
You learn
that's
that. You learn that early.
yeah, yeah. My team, we talk about it all the time. It's kind of like the way things are today aren't the way they should be tomorrow, and that's that like constant pressure mentality side of things. And then what an iconic brand that you work for that probably lives and feeds off of this every single day.
Yeah, it's such a unique brand where performance is at the center of what we do, in that term, performance in our product, but also motorsport is a huge core part of our brand. Whatever we build, we test on a racetrack. We compete with others, to make ourselves better. And there's kind of this mantra in motorsports: you either win or you learn. And I think that translates well just to everyday life. When you're going out there and you're putting yourself out there, you either succeed or you learn something. So there's no downfall to attempting, to trying and competing. And it's something that I really resonated with at Porsche.
Yeah. So I'm going to rattle off kind of your journey, because you said you held 7 different positions, but you went from obviously intern that you discussed to a contractor to financial manager to advertising collateral specialist to strategic marketing manager, e-performance marketing manager, including the launch of a very epic brand within Porsche, to branded entertainment managers today. Give us like a brief high level, because I'm going to go deep into the content, but holding all those positions, we talk about it all the time, when I'm advising young people, because now I'm old and I can say this, but, often people want to talk about like rising up throughout, the corporate ladder. And the reality of it is, and I love your journey here, and it's brilliant, but you're kind of like building that pyramid in your base. What was that like, just working for Porsche, but more importantly, holding so many different titles, and some of them are really not the same, right?
Yeah, quite different actually. When I got my foot in the door and I started as an intern, I quickly looked around and was like, this is a place I want to be at. But the tough thing about that is your internship's 6 months.
Wow.
So there's a clock ticking on your first day, and it's like at 6 months you have a chance to be renewed another 6 months, based off performance. But at the end of a year, the internship's done. And if you don't, or if you aren't able to progress into a contractor or a full-time role, you're out trying to find another job. So immediately, day one, week one, kind of wrap my head around, okay, how can I make myself valuable? How can I not just learn, which is what a usual internship is, but for me, I was out of an MBA. I was ready to work, but I wanted to be at Porsche, so I took an internship as a 25-year-old, I think maybe even 26. I looked really young. I was a little more shaven and had a tighter haircut. Everyone maybe thought I was 20 years old, so I let them believe it. But going through that, I positioned opened up as a contractor, which was the financial manager role, and it was purely budget management. And at that time, it was all on an Excel spreadsheet, so it's about a $50 million budget at that time that we managed on an Excel document, literally inputting invoices. And that role opened up after about 5, 6 months in the job. And I was like, I'll do it. I'll put my name in the hat. Had, I would say, little finance and accounting background. You have to take a few of those classes to get your MBA. So I, understood the basics, but it was, hey, I want to be here. I'll figure it out. So I put my name in, ended up taking the contractor role after about 6 months at the brand, and helped manage the budget, which seems mundane. You're in an Excel document 8-10 hours a day. You're inputting data very manually. But what it did was it gave me a great understanding of where we put our resources on this team, where we actually, put our dollars, what was important to us, what cost, maybe more money than the output that we were getting, what had a major output for a little bit of money that we were working on. And so I was able to get this really fundamental view of our group that you can't get anywhere else coming into the group, to understand our internal process, our internal finance, our internal procurement, the basic things that you need to do. If you want to spend any dollars at Porsche Cars North America, you better know our finance team well, you better know our procurement rules really well, or you're not going to last very long. So getting that year and a half as a financial manager was super, super important to me. Although it wasn't the sexiest job in the world, it wasn't the most glamorous, it really laid the foundation for me in the next roles that I took. And from there, a full-time role opened up called advertising and collateral specialist. I put my name in for that, was able to get that role, and its responsibilities really are about campaigns, product campaigns specifically. And at the time, we were super heavy into traditional media, as we called it, so TV, print, and out-of-home. That was my role in advertising and collateral specialist, product campaigns, but mainly in TV, print, and out-of-home. So I was able to go on productions, able to get in on strategy calls, able to get upstream on product announcements to start developing these campaigns. And I had a direct report to an awesome manager that really brought me in and really helped develop my skills at that advertising and collateral specialist role, so campaign planning, product planning. And then from there, I ended up taking a strategic marketing manager, which is essentially assistant to the VP of marketing, which is a totally different role. It was a lot of managing schedules, getting him in and out of places he needed to be, booking travel, creating presentations. So I went from an Excel-heavy job to a PowerPoint-heavy job, and I created an endless amount of PowerPoint slides for our VP of marketing for a couple of years. And then after that,
you could get work for Microsoft and be their guy that tests.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea. The Microsoft suite is my expertise, specifically PowerPoint. And then from there went a new all-electric vehicle called the Taycan was getting ready to be announced in around 2018, 2019. So a role popped up just to work on our communications and product campaign for the all-new Porsche Taycan, our first all-electric vehicle. So I started that in 2019, did that for a couple of years. Once that vehicle was launched and out into the world and kind of integrated into our product portfolio, I moved into my current role, which is brand and entertainment marketing manager, which at the time was something totally new for the brand. We hadn't leaned into entertainment before, but in this role that I'm currently in now, I manage TV, film, streaming, gaming, motorsports, as well as our brand campaign, There Is No Substitute, which launched last year. So it's a really wide range, and it's just kind of made up of things that I've accumulated over time, motorsports being something that I've worked on for 8 or so years. So it's a role that, if I could come in from the outside right now and cherry pick what I wanted to work on, this would be the exact role I would go for myself.
Well, and I think for our listeners, young listeners specifically, young in their career, or even pivoting to another career, what was so brilliant when we first prepped for the first time we were on stage together, it was, you've always said yes, and you've never kind of shied away from something. And then it's interesting because, especially on the marketing and advertising side, at a brand direct, let alone an agency, it's so easy just to be like, well, let's do an event pop up in Cannes, and we should do this, and we should fly in a car, and we should have all these celebrities. But for you to have the procurement side and the finance side, you can kind of come in at the right way. So it's kind of like your pitches become more acceptable because you understand, like, hey, here's the impacts, here's what's going to get rejected, what isn't. So, for our people young in their career, like, say yes more often. And it's almost like I would imagine internally within the walls of that building, you're highly respected, and that role was kind of maybe popped up, but also has evolved for you and with you for the brand itself. So let's kind of touch on some of the projects that you worked on, because I'm not going to lie, like, I love your job. I'll be your assistant to Scott DeVault if you ever want, and to be able to plan your travel, because you've done some pretty iconic projects. So let's kind of go through some of them. The Porsche Puma 911 Turbo collection, and I want to kind of like go deep into these, because this is what you do day to day, right?
Yeah, happy to. So starting at the Puma collab, which is one that is an all-time highlight. It's on my short list of things that I'm most excited to have been a part of. But the product launch was for the 8th generation of the 911 Turbo. So at Porsche, it's all evolution over time. And this was the 8th generation of one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic, vehicle we've made. And working with our agency, going through, at that time we had this big push about new audiences. We had seen average age of our owner increase year over year over year for almost a decade at that point in time. So it increased 1 year each year for 10 years. So we went from, a 45-year-old to a 55-year-old in basically a decade. And we kind of look around, and at that time, Harley Davidson was kind of a case study that was top of mind for a lot of people in our industry, and just in general, where they had an amazing community, amazing product, and their buyers sort of aged out over time. There's only so long you can ride a motorcycle, and we saw that happening. So really, from our side, it was how do we become more impactful, more relevant, and increase awareness amongst younger people, and specifically women. So we had this in the back of our minds as our kind of core strategy as we were launching the 911 Turbo. And one of the ideas that fell out about this was a shoe collab. Shoe culture, hype culture was just at its peak in 2016, 2017 when we did this. And so we came up and we had a partner in Puma who was a brand partner for motorsports. They made our racing suits. They made merch and other collabs on the merchandise side. So we gave them a ring. They were pumped to be a part of it. And we essentially created 8 individual shoes representative of each of the generations of the 911. We created about, I want to say it was 400 pairs of each shoe. And one of the cool aspects of it, we did a pre-launch, and the vehicle's 0 to 60 time was 2.7 seconds. So we promoted it, and on the website, the button was only active for 2.7 seconds for the pre-sale. And so the button's up 2.7 seconds with like a counter, you click to buy the shoes, and then it went away. We sold 80% of those shoes in the first 2.7 seconds, which was just amazing. I've got a pair upstairs. I saw an employee wearing them yesterday at the office. So you have these artifacts now forever that are representative of the brand. They came with, a really cool keychain. The details on them are amazing, and they pop up on, Hypebeast or other, goat shoes, if you're into that. They pop up there every now and then for 500-600 bucks, and it's cool to see.
I love that. Yeah, I'm a sneakerhead, so I have about 300 pair. So I know
Okay.
that look, I would love to be able to build bots to hit at 2.7 seconds, 2.6 seconds, but I also know I have quick fingers, and I always sidebar jokingly think it's hilarious that if you could record someone when a sneaker launch happens, which by the way, off whites are going to drop for Nike, it's like an exclusive pair. They drop the 28th, and then you got to have that finger like ready, or you got to have
Yeah.
some dude like build you a little click bot. But so going a little bit deeper, and this is what you and I talked about on stage, but it's what I love what Porsche's done, and I didn't realize Harley Davidson was kind of the case study, but it makes sense. But you and I have talked about this. Like, how do you capture the young generation well before, we were joking offline about my son Jake, and he's a huge car guy, and shout out to Uncle Bill, my best friend in Houston. He has a Porsche that sits in his garage, and I know you and I have talked about this story, and you've probably heard it a billion times from other owners, but you know Bill grew up, and we'll use him as the case study, as the example, but he grew up where his father loved cars, but he couldn't afford a car, and he always wanted a Porsche, and eventually one day he bought that Porsche. But now the evolution of what kids have access to, whether it's e-motorsports, or whether watching, which we'll go deep into Formula One, the movie, but now they get introduced. And on the drive to school today for Jake, when I was going to drop him off, he saw a 911 turbo. I think it was maybe a 95, 96. And he's like, Dad, that car is just so, you talk about it all the time. It's the shape of the car. Nothing else looks, and every other brand iterates on the shape like significantly, where the car's just the next car. So what is it in today's world of cultural and relevance? How do you capture that young person that then eventually the hope is have them in a Porsche by the age of 30, maybe earlier if they're successful quickly? But how do you build that brand equity at an early age without that consumer ever owning a car at an early age? To your point, a shoe collection or a shoe collab. Like, how does Porsche think about that in your role?
Yeah, it's a place that we spend a lot of time because it's a story that we're very familiar with. It's an aspirational brand, and that aspiration starts 20, 30, 40 years before you make that actual purchase. And what's really amazing about our brand is there's so many ways in. Just car culture, the shape that you mentioned, the sound, you could just leave it at that. You bring in motorsports, personalization and customization is a huge part of our brand, and one that I honestly think that we don't do a good enough job promoting. So for instance, in Europe, one of the bigger ways to purchase a car is especially a new car, you go to the dealership, you configure the exact car you want, and it's delivered to you 6 or 8 months later. In the U.S., we're we want immediacy, right? We want to go to the dealership, we want to leave with that car that day. And so it's kind of interesting when we talk to our colleagues outside of the U.S., the difference of buying habits, and really trying to get our buyer to, hey, if you're going to dream about this car for 20 or 30 years, get the exact one you want. And we lean into personalization and customization in that way. For certain audiences, some audiences need utility. Some, they need to know that it can fit into their daily lives. They need to know it can take their 2 kids to and from practices and school. So there's all these different ways in that we can kind of pull a lever for a particular audience. So really what it starts with is, who are we trying to talk to? What are their passion points? What are their mandatories for a vehicle? But we try not to get too far into the practical reasons why, because to be honest, if we compete with another brand on practicality, we're probably not going to win. Our vehicles are more expensive. They may have less comfort, options. Price for the options, we're going to be a little bit higher. So once you start competing on that level, it's not a place that we have a unique advantage. Where we do have the advantage is we've got over 75 years of amazing stories and people that are associated with the brand, vehicles, of triumphs on the track, of engineering feats, that we can lean on. And one of the great things that we typically do, we don't do anything super new without referencing, something old. But to answer the question directly, it's marrying one of the unique attributes of our brand to a particular audience. And so for the Puma shoe, we were going after a younger, let's call it 25 to 35-year-old male that's into shoe and hype culture at that time. And that's really where that idea naturally fell out of. We also have gaming, you have motorsports, as I mentioned. So there's a lot of different levers to pull, but we start with audience first.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's a brilliant tactic, but it's also probably makes your job a little bit more difficult and involved compared to your first job, where it was like, hey, all I got to do is like TV, radio, newspaper, print. And now it's evolved into like e-gaming, and how do we, make sure that the vehicle shows up. So my next question, I want to dive deeper into this because I think it's super cool. I know you guys did like the Xbox and Porsche collab. So if you want to touch on that briefly, and then I want to jump deep into physically having these Porsche vehicles in, and we'll rattle off the movies in just a second. But Xbox Porsche, that was pretty cool. I see your Xbox in the background. Like, do you also have the Xbox collab too? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. This one was for our 75th anniversary that we worked with Microsoft and Xbox on, and it came, kind of naturally out of that audience. We're going after the 25 to 35. They love fashion, they love gaming. So we met with Microsoft team, in 2021, basically a year before our 75th anniversary, and it just fell out of this conversation that Xbox did these really high-end one-off Gucci Xboxes that came with like a case, just super crazy high-end, super limited numbers, and we're like, oh, that would be cool. What if we did something like that? And just from that idea came this concept to create these Xboxes that would be hand painted in historic liveries from our years. Hippie, the one behind me, Salzburg, which is the 1970-917, our very first overall Le Mans win. So this red and white scheme, we had a Martini Racing. So these iconic colors that were on iconic cars through our history. And it's really marrying this new, younger audience that maybe knows Porsche at a surface level, but doesn't know the depth of our commitment to racing. It's been, this year is our 75th anniversary from our first our first class win at Le Mans, the 356 SL. And so we always have these like historic moments that we can look back to tell a new story. And that's really what we did with our Xboxes. And the great part about it is, from a business standpoint, we created 6 of these Xboxes. We had a sweepstakes, and really the idea was to get information, to get hand raisers, information, so we could continue that journey, because we knew this audience is 25 to 35, maybe even a little bit younger, and they were maybe 2, 3, 5 cars away from making a Porsche purchase, but we want to start that relationship and in their 20s. So we had over 2 million sweepstakes subscriptions, and each one of them was added to our email newsletter. So then it became this now monthly communication that we had with a 2 million individuals that were significantly younger, 30 years younger than our average buyer, that we could then start this relationship with. And we put them in a special bucket in our internal communications plan, where they didn't get everything. It wasn't, hey, here's the new 911 Turbo, go buy it. It was more higher level brand integrations, brand collabs, motorsports messaging, that we really then used to start bringing that group along and deeper into the Porsche brand. So it was incredibly successful. Just 6 Xboxes that we created resulted in 2 million new people into our database that we can retarget and recommunicate with.
Yeah. And I love that, because in a world of data and retargeting, we, being a sneakerhead as a very niche example, you get flooded all these shoes, and you're like, yeah, I'm a sneakerhead, but I only go after Dunks, highs and lows ones, and then maybe some SBs. And then you get, dropped, with all due respect to Air Force Ones, like, despise them. I think they're the ugliest shoes ever. And then you're now put in this bucket, but it's not well thought out the way that you guys do. And, sneakers are a bit different than obviously a Porsche and a luxury vehicle, but I would imagine like that pool of people, you're probably just slowly grooming them and talking to them in the right light, the way that they were introduced to the brand, or maybe the way that they accepted into the brand, makes them very unique. And that's going to be amazing to watch over the next, 5-10 years, and start to see, like, of those 2 million, how many of those then eventually go buy a Porsche. And, that becomes a science experiment in its own right mind, that we will go in a community a little bit later, but that's a small niche community, I would imagine, for Porsche.
Exactly, it's a super valuable one for us because we've got our core buyer, and we know who's buying our cars now, and we need to start formulating and creating the buyer of next 5-7 years. And that was really the goal of that campaign. And like you said, we now have data, we now have the ability to track that over time. And one of the tough things for me is, as a marketer, is you want to get messages out to the widest audience as possible. So like the idea would just be like, send it to everybody. And I've had to kind of come around to the conversion rate, the engagement rate should be the KPI, not the number of people who receive it. And so if the number of people who are receiving it needs to be more focused to make sure that it's the right message to the right person, and you see an engagement rate. For instance, we have a very focused motorsports email that goes out monthly, and we have a 70% open rate on an email newsletter, which for the industry is insane. But it's not our full database, several 100,000 people, but it's people that have risen their hand and say, I'm a motorsports person, keep me updated on this content, and then you see that in the engagement.
Yeah, and going back to it, it's an iconic brand. Whether you have never owned one, you want to be a part of it, even if it's just a pair of shoes or the Xbox. So let's pivot over, because this is super fun, because again, you're slowly talking to the consumer and reintroducing the brand in a different moment. And in the world of movies, like I'll rattle off a few, but Bad Boys for Life, that's one of the productions to Porsche for me specifically, where you're like, you associate Will Smith, and you're like, wow, that's, he's badass, and here he is with his Porsche. You got Transformers: Rise of the Beast, and of Thieves 2, Resident Evil, and then I'm intentionally leaving off the last one because I want to talk deeper about Formula One, the movie, which I've now watched, Scott, 11 times.
Love that.
I can't stop watching it. But
my favorite. Go ahead.
No, well, I was going to say, so like how does it? And I know the story with Formula One that I want you to the movie to share with the audience, but how does it work where you're like, hey, we want to put a Porsche in your movie? Or is it the director? Like, how does that begin? And maybe dive deep into one of those movies, not Formula One yet, but maybe dive deep into one of those movies on how it occurred. But from a consumer perspective, for me personally, it's like there's that shape, and then you associate that character in the movie, and you're like, I kind of want to be that guy, in a different world. And that reintroduction to that badass vehicle that is Porsche, and whatever the generation and the model that it is.
Yeah, it's so it's kind of from the same place that Xbox came from, where it was, we hear those stories, 16 Candles for some people, seeing a Porsche there, seeing Risky Business with Tom Cruise, and then the original Bad Boys changed product placement industry. I'd like to say we had something to do with that. But that was Michael Bay, the director's personal car that he put into that film, and it's still to this day, one of the highlight, if not the product placement that people point to most frequently as hey, that got me into Porsche, that made me want a 911. On our agency, we work with a branded entertainment agency called Rockets to the Moon, and one of our main points of contact there, he points to that movie as what made him love Porsche, and it's not a rare story. So with that in mind, that's sort of how we started developing the strategy for branded entertainment. How do we create moments like that, really authentic, true to the brand, connected to characters that we want to be connected with in the space? Candidly, we cannot control our brand across all placements. Somebody can go rent a Porsche, film with it, and make a streaming show or a TV show or a film. But what we wanted to do is making sure that the community available to review scripts, to provide vehicles, to provide mechanical support, engineering support in some instances. And so our first task was finding Porsche enthusiasts in the industry. If you wait till a placement's available, it can be interchangeable with any brand. At that point, once they're like getting ready to, once a group's getting ready to film, they say we need a high-end sports car. It could be a Mercedes-Benz AMG GT. It could be a Maserati. It could be a Lamborghini. It could be a Porsche. Those are not the opportunities we want. Because if anybody could be interchangeable, if any other brand could be interchangeable, that's not the place for Porsche. So we went earlier in the process and we started looking at production teams, directors, transportation captains. We brought them to the PEC, got them into our cars, got them familiar with our brand, got them familiar with our people. And that started in 2016. And our first, I would say, major integration didn't happen until 2019. So it wasn't overnight because you sort of have to, when you're starting that early, it's a 2 or 3 year process to develop scripts before you're actually shooting. And 2019 started with Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. We had, of course, not an in-universe placement, but an integration around it. And from there, people started to lift their heads up and take notice. And then we wanted to grab the properties that meant something to us. And Bad Boys, given the first one was one. Bad Boys 2 had gone to a Ferrari hero car, and our goal, once we started working on this brand entertainment strategy, was we got to get Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett back in a Porsche. So when Bad Boys for Life, which was the third one, came around, we were able to be close enough with that group that we were able to work a placement in there for Mike Lowry back into a 911. And then again for Bad Boys Ride or Die, the fourth installment, we were able to bring it back. So it was reigniting one of the major placements and making sure, hey, this is a property that we belong in. Mike Lowry belongs in a Porsche. We need to make that right.
When you say Mike Lowry, do you want to, like, the most iconic quote? Yeah, Will Smith. But you want to say this is Mike Lowry's place.
Mike Lowry when he picks up his phone, like, it's just such an iconic person, character, and vehicle placement for us that it was one that was high on our list. We have to make that right.
Yeah, the other one that you and I talked about, and it wasn't on the list, and is not an actual real life, but from the Pixar movie Cars with Sally Carrera Blue. How did that come about? Because that one, actually, your fiance was telling me the story about this, but that's crazy. Like, it's crazy cool.
Yeah, that one. So the original placement started in early 2000. I want to say 2005 is when Cars came out. Actually, I'm pretty sure that's right because they're 2006 because it's the 20th anniversary later this year.
That's right.
Sally Carrera was a deal signed before I started at Porsche, about 8 years before I started at Porsche. So it was in the original Cars franchise, and it's something that we've leaned on, specifically recently. But the power that placement has is incredible. Even 20 years later, we have Sally Carrera at our headquarters here in Atlanta on display. We had Lightning McQueen next to Sally for a while too, and we had hundreds and hundreds of people paying $5 just to gain access to the facility for their kids to come take photos of Sally Carrera.
Kidding.
So we don't have a ton of kids in the Porsche Experience Center, to be completely honest, but for like 3 weeks, a flood of 6, 8, 10, 12-year-olds coming in with Lightning McQueen and Sally Carrera backpacks and t-shirts, taking photos with the cars. It was incredible. My fiance Shelby, as you mentioned, brought Sally Carrera down to Daytona for a photo shoot. People were going nuts at the racetrack. The social content went crazy. And you sometimes forget like how impactful and meaningful those placements are to people when you're making them. But it reignites that when you get to see things like Sally back at the headquarters, and hopefully we're able to do more with Cars franchise in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, Formula One, the movie. I think I've told you this. It has nothing to do with Porsche, but it has everything to do with it. But by far, like, it trumped Field of Dreams for me.
Ooh,
and that says a lot.
That.
Yeah, but it's such an iconic movie. So give our listeners you and I've talked about this, and you kind of told the story on stage, but how did the vehicle come into play there, and what a pivotal role? And then I want to go deep into Le Mans, and your personal experience of being able to be a part of that.
Yeah. So it really started, with our strategy with getting close in with production and filmmakers. So at a very early level. So the relationship started actually with Top Gun Maverick. So we worked with Joe Kaczynski and Jerry Bruckheimer Studios on a relatively small placement, but it was a placement much like Bad Boys, where the original Top Gun had a 356 in it. So we wanted to keep those heritage plays going. So when Top Gun Maverick was coming out, we were able to place a vehicle in that. Again, relatively small placement, pretty quick, but a heroic shot at the end that we were really, really happy with. But from that relationship with Jerry Bruckheimer and Joseph Kaczynski, shortly after Top Gun Maverick, they said, hey, our next project, we want to make the definitive racing film of this generation. We want to make, what Steve McQueen did with Le Mans in the 70s. We want to do that justice now. And at the time, Porsche was rumored to be going to Formula One. So they were like, hey, is this true? Is there any way that we can work together on this? We met with them several times through the development. Of course, Porsche is not in Formula One. That didn't work out. And we sort of parted ways. They're saying, if this is an F1 film, if Porsche's not an F1, there's probably not a place for you in this film. They went away and then actually came back to us and said, hey, we're in the process of developing the script. We brought Lewis Hamilton, F1 legend, on as an executive producer, and he feels for the story to work, the only place that Brad Pitt's character could go directly to Formula One from is endurance racing, and specifically a 24-hour race like the 24 Hours of Daytona. And so they said, there's now this opening sequence that we want to film at the 24 Hours of Daytona. We want it to be in a 911 GT3R. Is this appealing to you? And we said, say less, we're on it.
Right.
And got to work with their team. So that's kind of how it came together.
Yeah. And then someone from Porsche, factory driver Patrick Long, actually was in the movie as well.
Yeah, that was one of the cooler parts is, when you get to work on something like this, it's never been done before. We filmed during the live race. So during the actual 24 hours, we had a camera car that competed. It finished 8th in its class. We were really holding our breath and crossing our fingers to like how crazy it would be if we won or if we podiumed. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. They did finish the race though, but we had IMAX cameras mounted in a 911 GT3R, official participant in the race for 24 hours during the race, and then separately leading up to it for 3 weeks, we filmed the stunt sequence in the middle of the night from 10 p.m. to usually around 4 a.m. for 3 weeks. And like you mentioned, we were able to bring in all of these just Porsche team members from all over the place, specifically Patrick Long, who has a cameo in the film. He's credited. He was not only a consultant for making sure that scene was realistic, but he was also in the film. He gets out of the car when Brad Pitt's character Sonny Hayes gets in, and so to be able to pull in people like Patrick Long. We also had a guy by the name of Johnny Canavas, who's our head chief driving instructor at UCLA, who's both a stunt driver and he's got a little bit of a cameo. When in the very beginning, when the BMW driver tries to fight Sonny Hayes' character in the pit lane, that's Johnny Canavas holding him back.
Holding him back. That's awesome.
It's great to go back and rewatch it and be able to point out those things and to really rally the Porsche community to support this, because it was not. We had 6 GT3Rs prepped, ready to go. That doesn't just happen. They came from all over the U.S. Wright Motorsports and John Wright have to give a huge shout out to their team. They were the main team that ran the car for the 24 hours, gave us access to their pit boxes, gave us access to their engineers. You never know when you ask questions like that. Hey, can we take your real racing team and make it a fictional team for this race, add these cameras, add this extra things going on while you're trying to do your job and win a race, and to have them emphatically say yes and go above and beyond was really special.
Yeah, that's huge. So you personally, I know you're a big part of putting these collaborations and these experiences together. What was it like for you? You were on set through the process, and what
Yeah.
was your personal experience in that?
Yeah, so once we got on site, a lot of my job was sort of done. So a lot of it was logistics, getting access to the 6 cars, getting Wright Motorsports on board, getting Pat Long, training Brad Pitt. So we actually had several training sessions to make sure Brad Pitt was comfortable in a 911 GT3R, because he pulls out of the pit when he burns out, does a little rooster tail. That's actually Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt actually drove 170 plus miles an
It's
hour.
amazing. Yeah.
So all of that leading up to it was years in advance. So it's multiple trainings with Pat Long and Brad Pitt, working with logistics teams to get 911 GT3Rs flown over from Europe. We had a huge lift from our German counterparts that were very much involved and with me on site. But on site, once you're there, it's putting out fires if they come up, and then just trying to like slap yourself from just being a fanboy for a lot of it, because you get to see somebody like a Joe Kaczynski and a Jerry Bruckheimer
Mhm.
in their element, and it was impressive where they would be watching the playback screen, and they would say, okay, got it. They would mark the shot off of the board that they had. Like, it was one of the most impressive run productions I've ever seen. Everyone was on it. Everyone had their job. Everyone was killing it. And from my side, I was just a fly on the wall, just
Yeah.
trying to take it all in.
Yeah, and it had to take in this whole conversation back as we kind of wrap up here in the next couple of minutes. It's you have to like, I don't know you too well, but I know you well enough to be like, you had to have flashback to that like rejection of the internship to be like, dude, I'm here. Like,
How did
and
I
you
get here?
not just here, but like I helped make a lot of this happen, and that's such an amazing thing. The last couple of minutes, I want to talk about community because, obviously, product is at the heart of the brand. It's the heart of everything that is Porsche, but community. What what is that? It's a close second for Porsche, but tell me a little bit more about what that means.
Yeah, our product is insane. It's why we are who we are. 75 plus years of creating the best road cars, the best race cars on the planet. Certainly is what we could point to as saying why we are special. But the community that's built around those vehicles is as you mentioned, a close second to why we're so special. Just in the United States, we have over, I think it's like 150,000 Porsche Club of America due-paying members that go out, they do their own drives, they do their own motorsports events, they do their own yearly Porsche Parade event. The people that are attracted to this brand and the people that stay close to this brand are what makes it so special. And what's really great about the Porsche Experience Center that we've been talking about is, yes, it's our corporate offices, but I can go out of the back door of our corporate office and watch and see and witness people becoming Porsche people live, coming off of the track, eating in our restaurant, going through our museum. You see kids walking around waving flags, Porsche flags. Like the community around what we do is as important, in my opinion, as the vehicles that we produce, and it's just really special. And we know that it's a dual-edged sword. Like, you do something great, you're going to hear about it. If you do something not so great, you're going to hear about it. But I would not trade a passionate community like that for anything, for the positives and the negatives. And it's truly something that makes this brand super unique, specifically in the United States.
Yeah. Last question, and you can say I can't answer that, but it's like when people ask me who my favorite kid is out of the triplets and Wes. But do you have a favorite vehicle? And then if you can share, I've talked about this, like how as an employee, how that works. I don't know if you can talk about that, but what's your favorite Porsche?
That's a super tough question. Probably has changed 10 times in my time at PCNA. But one of my favorite all-time cars is from way back, the 904 Carrera GTS. A lot of listeners have no idea probably what that is, but go look it up. It's one of the most beautiful cars. It's also the last car that was both a race and road-going car, which is really interesting. We have a timeline of model cars at PCNA, and it's above the timeline are production cars, below the timeline are motorsports cars, and this one gets to sit right in the middle because it was the last both road and track vehicle. First carbon fiber reinforced plastic body, so it was basically two pieces sandwiched together. Crazy light, and just really, really beautiful. And it's actually where the word Carrera, 911 Carrera came from the first time we used it, which is from Carrera Panamericana, which is a race in Mexico. But that car is just stunningly beautiful, and one that's just kind of burned in my mind whenever people ask me that question. But maybe next time we talk, I'll have a different answer.
It'll be completely different, yeah.
Yeah, and then on the employee program, yeah, one of the biggest perks of working at PCNA is we have an employee lease program where we get to configure a car within set parameters. So we get to choose exterior color, interior color, deviated stitching options, from sport exhaust, sport suspension, and everything in between. Again, within reason, we have some guardrails. And then that vehicle is delivered 6 or 8 months later. When it gets here, we order the next one 6 or 8 months later. And so we're able to, it's twofold. One, it's just an amazing perk, but two, it allows us to experience the product. And ideally, you're rotating cars, you're trying different things, you're going from sports cars to SUVs, and you're able to get a much better understanding of our product. And it's just really cool and a great perk to work with the company.
I'm going to give you my last, even though you didn't ask. My favorite old Porsche 917 Spider. Yeah, super cool. My dad never owned a Porsche, but he's big into model cars. He has over 300 model cars, Scott. It's wild. Like, it's in our garage where we grew up, and he has every single Porsche that has ever been dropped. He's made, also Ferrari, but that one just popped in my head. I just had to re-Google it, and I was like, yeah, those are the fun ones back in the day.
I love it. I too have a robust model car collection downstairs in our spare bedroom. So
I love it.
I suffer from the same affliction.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm beyond excited about being able to share your journey, your story, and what you do and the value that you bring to Porsche, and then just bringing to light the brand and the entertainment side of what you do, and what the brand is just so iconic, and how what I love about it is just how it just continues to be a part of culture, and it's not forced, to your point earlier, but it's just organically lives. And I love how it's community driven, but most importantly, it's just like this methodical, journey in people's minds that, like, one day, and then it's that one day. I would imagine every one day, everyone kind of has a story. And I love how that evolution, and how you guys and you and your team and others have evolved within Porsche to understand, like, that person that's playing the Xbox, that's driving the Porsche in the Formula One game, may one day be an owner of it. And I know personally, I had this goal of one day having a other luxury vehicle, old school. And now, since knowing you and a handful of other movies that have impacted it, and then obviously my boy Bill having one, I'm kind of like, I'm going to have a Porsche in my garage one day that I'm going to drive.
I can't wait for that day.
Yeah, I love it. All right, my friend, we'll keep up the amazing work. I'm excited to see what you guys do next, and you personally, as your journey kind of continues to evolve. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you having me.
All right. Hey, we're going to cut here, but then if you could hang tight for like 2 minutes, it's